All right, we are back with another installment of Accepting the Challenges here, where we want to put a spotlight, put a shine on the educators around the world, from the United States to Europe to Australia and New Zealand. We want to showcase the story and the journey of educators around the world. And today we have a really interesting guest. Now, I did not ask how to pronounce your name, so I'm going to give it an attempt. And if I butcher it, please do not hold it against me. But Chris Tennyson.
Yeah, that's it. Tennyson,
Ah,
great job. Yep.
awesome. So Chris, welcome. And if you will, share a little bit where you're at right now, what your current role is in the education world.
So I am the assistant regional superintendent of schools for Lee Ogle and Whiteside counties in Illinois. I'm in the northwest part of the state, kind of about 2 hours west of Chicago, and over towards the Illinois-Iowa border on the Mississippi River. And for people that don't understand that term, regional superintendent of schools, and it can differ from state to state, but Illinois has regional offices. And it's kind of like people ask me all the time, well, what does that mean? And I kind of say, well, if you can imagine a county sheriff's department in a county, we're there to work with the school districts, we're there to help them. We handle all their licensures to make sure that all their teachers and their teachers' assistants and that their administrators are all properly licensed and get the training that they need. We help with professional development for them to keep their license. We inspect all their school buildings every year. We go through and make sure that the buildings are safe for their students and their faculty and their parents and community members, and work with them on getting things fixed if they need to. We advise them in legal matters, and we help them to get things they need from the State Board of Education and questions that they have that they need answered. We're just kind of in that advisory position. I mean, we do have some things that we can do with licensure. If a teacher or administrator were to get arrested on certain charges, then yeah, we'd have to get involved. But most of the day-to-day operations are still left up to the individual school districts and school boards. But it's really a unique position to be in. And then the other main responsibility that I have is in the three counties that I run the alternative school. So any students that attend our school districts that have been expelled for disciplinary reasons or have suffered multiple traumas in their life and just can't attend in a normal school setting because of the stress and anxiety they have, I run the school for them. So those students come to us every day from those school districts, and we've got about 70 right now that we work with that are just phenomenal kids that are really really important to us. And basically, they're at the point where we're kind of all they have left. So I've got an incredible principal and staff over there that work daily with those students, and we've just been able to have a ton of success stories there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So let's go back, all the way back to where Chris grew up, right? So tell us a little bit about where you're from and a little bit about your journey, kind of going through life.
So I grew up in Zion, Illinois, which if you look at a map, you're going to go north out of Chicago, you're in Cook County, then you get to Lake County, and then up along Lake Michigan, there's some towns that kind of go up from Cook County. Waukegan's the biggest one. It's the hub of Lake County. And then just north of Waukegan is Zion Benton. And that's where I grew up. Went to high school at Zion Benton Township High School, large high school, matter of fact, so big that they had two campuses, which was kind of nice. So
Oh
freshmen and
wow.
sophomores were in one campus. It was about 3,000 students. So juniors and seniors in another. So yeah, it was big, it was busy, but it was kind of nice because you didn't have to get by. As a freshman, you didn't get harassed by the juniors and
Yeah.
seniors, and then once you were older, you didn't have to deal with the freshmen. So it was kind
Yeah.
of nice. And basically, I don't want people to get the wrong impression of Zion. It was a great town, but when I was growing up there, our house got broken into probably 7 or 8 times, and it was really hard on our family and for me to come home and what little I had to see it dumped out on the floor, and going through my stuff and taking the change I had in my piggy bank. As a young kid, that was kind of depressing. And I remembered the 7 or 8 times we had some police officers that came that really cared, that said they were going to do everything they could to find who did it. And then we had a handful that basically just told us there was no way they were going to catch them and just be glad they didn't do worse damage.
Yeah.
And that was kind of upsetting to me. And at an early age, I kind of made a decision that I think I want to be a law enforcement officer. I think I want to be there to look out for people who can't always look out for themselves, and to just make sure that everyone's following the rules and that we're all okay with each other. And that kind of started my journey. So I graduated high school. I went to Western Illinois University, which a lot of people, it's a smaller college in Illinois, but I still think currently ranked third in the nation for law enforcement. Their law
Oh,
enforcement
wow.
program is outstanding. So that's why I went there. Got my bachelor's degree, went back home up to Lake County, got on a bunch of police lists, and Mundelein called me first, which is a northwestern suburb of Chicago, a nice community. About 35,000 people lived there at the time, but they had three major corporate, like Medline Industries is there, so the daytime population of the community was just crazy.
Yeah.
But about 35,000 residents that lived there, and did patrol for 2 years. Then street gangs came out of nowhere in the early 90s. And the next thing I know, I was on the gang crime task force for all of Lake County. So for 2 years of my life, we were very busy. We went to anywhere that there were multiple gang shootings or problems, and we'd roll into that area for 2 weeks and try and clean it up, and had some hairy moments. But good Lord's been with me my whole life. I've survived all those. So um, made detective, was excited, and then found out that I was going to be moved to the high school to be the high school resource officer at Mundelein High School. About 2,000 students, and I wasn't quite sure what to expect going into that position, but it was the position that changed my life. And I knew within the first couple of months there, getting to work with the high school students, I got hired to coach, hired to supervise the weight room and work with the students. Obviously, attended all their events to make sure that the kids were safe and that the community members were safe, and that really changed me. And I did that for 6 years, and then was on the list to become a sergeant. And the chief let me know it was time for me to come back to the department and start thinking about working my way up the command staff. I tried to turn it down. That wasn't in the cards. So I had a decision to make, after a 10-year career. Do I just go back to doing policing, which I still loved, or do I really follow my true passion? And I made that decision. I retired after 10 years and was going to go back to college and get a teaching degree. My sister is a professor at Sauk Valley Community College out here in Dixon, right next to Sterling, where my office is. And she called me and she said, "Hey, there's this school out here in Sterling that they want to start a program to teach juniors and seniors about criminal justice careers and give them the opportunity to get into those careers, and they don't have anyone to teach it." And I said, "Well, I can't. I have a bachelor's in law enforcement. I was almost done with my master's in law enforcement." But she told me in Illinois, and I didn't know at the time, as long as you have a bachelor's degree and 3 years of experience in a field, in technical classes, you can get a degree. So you can a license. So I came out and interviewed for it. They hired me on the spot, and kind of never looked back. So that got me 2 hours out of Chicago, and so now I'm in this area that I've never been to in my life. I'm in the middle of the three counties, and I just got right to work because I people know that my true passion is trying to help kids get ready for life. I mean, we all talk about the reading and the writing and the arithmetic. It's all important, very important,
Sure.
but it's only part of what we do. I mean, how successful is that student going to be if they're really, really book smart, but they don't have the tools necessary to tackle life? So it's what I love doing, and jumped right in, and took that job, started the course. I had the biggest program in the building. I still today, yesterday, I ran into a student that I had at an event, and she came up to me and recognized me right away. And I've got so many police officers in the area that are on duty. The state's attorney for Lee County was one of my students. I've got a lot of lawyers, people I talked into becoming attorneys. It's just awesome. And
Yeah.
and I had people that I work with at Mundelein High School and at my job here at Sterling at the Career Center. I had administrators always tell me, if you get the chance, go back to school. You'd be a great principal. So I'm not good with free time. Like
Yeah.
if I have free time, I'm always wondering, okay, there's something I could be doing to help kids, or is there something I should be doing to make me a better educator?
Sure.
So I went back to school, got my second master's degree, got my principal licensure, and Dixon High School hired me, which is out here. It's one of our larger schools, and it is the biggest one in Lee County. At the time, they had about 1,000 students, and I became their assistant principal. I did that for 7 years. Went back to school again to get my superintendent's endorsement, and Fulton High School, which was a school in Whiteside County, hired me to be their principal. Did that for 5 years. And then the regional superintendent of schools, my boss, Bob Sonnegroth, came over and met with me and said, "I've got to know you well. You've got your superintendent's endorsement done now. I'm getting ready to retire. I'd like you to come over and learn from me and take over the office." So here I am, a knucklehead law enforcement guy, moved out to Sterling, Illinois in 2001. Didn't know a single person out here. And Pretty soon, I'm going to be moving up to be regional superintendent of schools that oversees the 3 counties. So I can't tell you how blessed I am. You know, God's been with me through the whole trip, and my family's been behind me. And I just finished up all my coursework for my doctorate degree, and I'm in the middle of my dissertation. So getting that done and looking forward to finishing that up.
Wow, I tell you, an inspiring story. You know, we all have unique journeys. And for context, for anybody watching or listening, Chris and I do not know each other. This is the first time that he and I are having conversation, and I'm learning all of this as you're learning this as well. So, man, I tell you what, I love the stories, and I've had quite a few of them doing this of someone not being in education and being drawn into education. So I don't know if you've seen it yet, and if not, I can send it over to you. But one of the early interviews I did was with a gentleman named Fred Johnson. So Fred was a colonel in the Army, 30-year retired, got out, and now is going into his second year of teaching middle school and going through it. And I love these stories of serving, and it's a true testament of who you are and where your altruistic drive lies, right? Of I want to serve other people, and that's what you're doing. That's an amazing thing, and it comes with a lot of responsibility. The path that you took, because I would assume your move into law enforcement was driven by a motivation of what you saw that you wanted to be a part of change. You wanted to be a different alignment of that. So then you got into a position to now influence in a positive way, much bigger than you ever could have just being a detective on the street and those kind of things. But that comes with a lot of responsibility, right? Like you're now having to, you're not vetting, I guess that's still the different departments and the states, position. But I would assume part of that you were trying to weed some of them out who didn't need to be in the class, or, educate and move those things.
Well, I mean, and I'm still learning. It's my third year in this job as assistant. I'm getting ready to take over as the regional superintendent in the near future. And it's like any of us, we're learning every day, not only what we're responsible for, but we're also learning how can I better be doing this? Like, how can I work smarter to help kids and help teachers help kids? And that's the best part of my job is getting to work with all the districts, and especially in a time like this, to try and help them help their kids better, because we all know we got a ton going on right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, there's definitely a story I want to dive into, but I want to ask: did your time in law enforcement, in a way, prepare you for what has transpired in education over the last 6 to 8, 9 months?
Well, my time in law enforcement, and you mentioned people coming from other careers, that it made me who I am today. Like there is a lot going on in education right now that is very, very stressful. And even with this pandemic, you can say, yeah, some of these decisions could be life or death. But truly, that career in law enforcement, I mean, every second of every day, you're a second away from having to make a really big decision that could
Sure.
really have a big impact on a lot of people's lives and could be a life or death decision. So to have that experience, to get comfortable with it, to learn how to remain calm in those situations, to know what people look for in a leader, it's a big, big help. So yeah, that ability, people that know me know, they see me in the position that I'm in now, and they go, "What does it take to get you stressed out or upset?" Or and what they don't understand is that sometimes I am stressed out or I'm
Right.
upset. But it's really hard if if they see their leader stressed out or upset, that becomes hard. I mean, we all know when we go flying on an airplane, if something's wrong, as long as that flight attendant's calm, I'm okay.
Yes.
'Cause she's
Yes.
up there, she or he's up there every day handling it, and they've been through this. But the minute you start to see fear in their eyes, then you start to think, okay, something's not good. And we all know that about leadership, that no matter
Sure.
what's going on, we have to try and be that calm,
Yeah.
voice in the center of the storm to get things done and move forward.
Yeah. Chaos in leadership never. There are instances where it might work, and sometimes that works in sports at the halftime. Rah rah speech at the football game or basketball and those things. But overall, as a long term philosophy, chaos never works in leadership. And it's funny you talk about flying. So in my previous company, I would take a lot of my team with me, and we would fly. And the long flight. So when you leave LA, it's about 16-hour flight. over to Australia, and most people have never done that before. I've done it so many times. I just hop on the plane. It's normal to me. So we would always take some new people with us every time I go because I wanted my team to experience that travel. And they look at me and they say, "Man, we're going to be over water for 16 hours." And I was like, "Yeah, we are." I was like, "I'll be honest. I think it's probably better than being over land for 16 hours." And they said, "Well, like, what do you do if something happens?" I said, "Look, in this 16 hours, until they tell you we're landing or until they tell you we're taking off, if you ever see the flight attendants all go sit down and buckle up, that's when you know you have a problem. That's when you know you need to be worried. Until that happens, don't stress and don't worry about it at all." So let me ask you this. So you have and I can tell that you're a very humble and serving person just by how you're carrying yourself and the stories that I've been privy to. I definitely have a bit more context, not personally knowing somebody, having been able to now search because I had some free time before we hopped on here. But if you don't mind, and if it's not something you enjoy talking about, I totally understand it. But if you don't mind, I'd love for you to share with those people tuning in. Uh, uh, I would imagine it was a life changing scenario that happened for you when you were the principal at Fulton High School. Back, was that 2017 or 2018 when that happened?
It was 2017,
Okay.
2017, and it really, when you read the article, and I still laugh. I mean, when the reporter called me the next day and said, "I'm from the New York Times. I'd like to come out and talk to you," I said, "Really? Where are you? Who are you? What are you
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
about?"
Right.
So
Yeah.
and I said, "The incident went okay. No one got hurt. Everyone's good. It went exactly how it should have." And she said, "Chris, we need one of those stories right now."
Yes.
So I said, "Sure, come on out." And I met with the reporter, and I'm going to be totally honest with you. I don't think the New York Times is a very positive publication very often, but they did a nice article on our incident, and it was just simply we had a situation, and we all know what we're dealing with violence in schools, and how things are going. And it's one of my main responsibilities here as the assistant regional superintendent. They asked me, "What's your main job?" And they all think it's to educate kids. And I tell them it's not. My main job, the thing that's most important to me, is that I make sure that every single one of my students and my staff members go home safe to their families every night. Because if they don't feel safe coming in the building, there's not going to be any learning that gets done.
Sure.
So that's always been my priority since I've switched over in careers. And it's one thing I can bring to this profession is to help try and make kids safe, teachers safe, administrators safe, and that we're all in this together. So my kids know that, I have meetings with students, and as a principal, they knew that we were a family no matter what. And they knew that just like some families at Thanksgiving, we were going to have arguments, we were going to have bad
Sure.
days, good days. But at the end of the day, if we were all going to go home safe to our families, that was on all of us together collectively to make sure that that happened, no matter who we were aggravated at or frustrated with. And we had a situation where I was out in the hallway, like I always am during passing period. A student I knew very well came up to me, and she didn't have to say a word. I knew something was wrong. And she just said, "Mr. T," short for Mr. Tennyson, that's what they all call me, "can we go to your office right now?" And she showed me her phone, and there was a text message on it from a student who had graduated a year before. And I learned very quickly that he was dating a good friend, close friend of this girl, and had just found out that the girl he was dating may have been seeing another young man. And he was not happy about it. And he wanted to know who, and they wouldn't tell him. And he basically said, "I'm on my way there. I'm cocked, I'm locked, I'm ready to rock. People are going to get hurt, hell, even killed. Look out. I'm going to find out who this is." I mean, okay, we don't have a school resource officer. The high school I was at was about 300 students. I had a great relationship with all the officers on the PD. I immediately called them because I knew he wasn't on campus yet. They came over. We put the school on what we call a soft lockdown, which means there's no danger on campus, but there's the potential for there to be. So that's when we limit hallway traffic. The assistant principal and I went room to room and told everyone, "We're not in danger, we're fine, but stay out of the hallways, keep your doors locked. Teachers, you can continue to teach, and we'll monitor the situation." The police did their job. They found out where he was. He was actually leaving college about 45 minutes away and on the road on the way up to our school. They knew the path that he was probably going to take. They went, they found him, pulled him over, made the arrest, got him to the station, and we went back to business as usual. And then the next thing I knew, I had all the TV reporters and newspaper reporters at my office that afternoon, and had the New York Times calling the next day. And it did. It went exactly like it should. Nobody got hurt. I knew the young man very well. He was my student for 4 years, and the last thing I wanted to see was him pulling up to the school with a
Sure.
weapon and seeing the police end his life. I
Yep.
mean, how tragic would that have been? Because he obviously wasn't in the right frame of mind with what he was going through. So it just went the way that it should, and that's always been very important to me. That whatever organization I'm in, that we have to understand that no matter what our disagreements are, what our frustrations are, how we feel about each other, nothing is worth loss of life. And
Sure.
if we all work together and we feel comfortable about making sure that we're in it together, then students don't have a problem reporting those things, and making sure that we're all safe. And they know that it's on them to help make sure that we're all safe. So it really wasn't a big, huge deal to me. It was just, this is how it's supposed to go. But it was nice that other people recognize that you can work hard to keep a school safe.
Sure. No doubt. And it's one of those things where, it's you know, I would assume, from an educator standpoint, in today's world, that's one of your worst nightmares of having to deal with, right? It's like you plan about it, you go through. I mean, my wife has went through them where they do the stage PD, and they go through and do a lockdown and do those things. You do it, but it's much. And again, this goes back to your experience as a law enforcement officer. You've dealt with that real world environment. Especially you're in a gang unit. You're dealing with criminals that are literally looking to kill you or anyone else who's not with them, regardless of the reason. So in that moment, you had already experienced that, and you already went through it. And I think that's you're right. It does need those stories. It's much like the gentleman in Portland that happened. What was it, last year or the year before, where he turned the corner and the kid was right there with the gun, and he ended up talking to him and then just hugging him and taking the gun away from him. That it was all on video, and he went through. We like, and this is why I tell people, as educators, you guys are superheroes in a lot of ways. And I know I can tell by your demeanor and how you go about things, you don't feel that way, but it, when you do it right and you're taking responsibility for, do you have kids, if you don't mind me asking?
I have three stepsons, but they're,
Okay.
yeah, they're my
Yeah.
son. Yep.
Yeah. So you know what it's like to be a dad. You know that feeling of that. So you know how big of a response it truly is, a responsibility for, I'm giving you my kids for the day, right?
Mhm.
I want you to, I trust that you're going to do what you have to do. And to do that, I can see why the community, I can see why people saw that as, an extra level of duty. And, because not everybody is built that way. Not everybody, you only, so I've been on the other side of it. So I've had a gun pulled on me 3 times in my life. I grew up in bad neighborhoods. I can go walk the west end of Detroit and be okay. I can go down to Opelika, Florida and be okay. But you don't really know how you're going to react in those situations until those situations happen. You obviously had that experience, and man, that's a truly awesome story. I would assume now that's allowed you to now take what you learned in that day, but also use what you had been doing up until that point, and now implement that within the schools you oversee as well.
Well, and it's fascinating. I didn't know it at the time, but it's what's led to my research that I'm doing for my doctorate degree, because the Secret Service puts out a great report. They've done two of them
Yeah.
now, a lengthy report on violence incidents in schools and in the workplace. And they just rolled out their latest report at Soldier Field, and I'm a big Bears fan, so I got invited as in a regional soup to meet with all the local law enforcement people and hear from the director about the report, which a lot of the information from both reports are in my chapter 2 of my dissertation. And that's what I'm doing mine on, because including the one I just told you about, there's three others in this area that have happened in the last 5 years,
Oh wow.
where a person was either on campus with a gun or on their way to campus with a gun, and nobody got hurt. The situation ended with no injuries or fatalities. And that's what my dissertation's about. I'm doing a qualitative study where I'm going in and interviewing key people at all those schools to see if I can find any similarities as to why
Yeah.
theirs did okay. And at the end of that Secret Service presentation, I met with Dr. Elathari, who's in charge of that. And I just let her know, I said, this data is really going to help me for mine. And she asked about it. And I told her, and she said, I want to read that because no one's really studied the ones that went well. And that jives with my reaction to the New York Times. I'm like, why do you care about coming out here at nobody got hurt and we don't look at those? So I think it's really interesting for me. This would be horrible if I wasn't interested in the topic, but it's interesting for me to go now and look at these incidents to see if I can find any similarities that will help other schools.
Well,
Like we
yeah,
need
it
to
could
learn
help
about
schools around
this.
the world. Yeah,
Yeah. It's one thing to study the ones that go bad, and we have to because they're horrible.
sure.
But I'm hoping that maybe we can find some other things to learn from some of the ones that went right.
Well, I mean, there's got to be something in the district that is being done for. There's a reason. I mean, obviously, you don't want to ever have to deal with it, right? You want to be the district that has never dealt with it in 40 years, right? But there's something that you guys are doing that is right, and I mean, absolutely, I think that not just a dissertation, but it needs to be a training, and it needs to be a book, probably even to help educators around, because I deal with educators in many different settings in many different countries, and it is a concern that comes up. I'm here in Kentucky. We've had, unfortunately, some incidents here where they went the complete other way, and it's the trauma that comes out of that, unfortunately, affects the community and affects young people in a way that I don't even know if we still even have really wrapped our heads around, what it is. So anything we can do to prevent that, and it's, man, it's this story. I had no idea, but this story, this journey that you went through, I can see how you clearly see your purpose, and you clearly see where you're headed, and that's amazing. That's
Oh,
amazing.
like I said, I've been very blessed. I get to wake up every day and do something that I absolutely love.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this, and I'll use it from an experience that I'm aware of. So let's go back to a little bit of your time working with gangs. It's something that has infiltrated even the rural areas now, and although more perpetrated gangs, I think, than actual real organizations and those type of things. As an educator, if you were to talk to if you were to talk to some middle school teachers who all of a sudden have come across a couple kids that are talking about this gang or talking about that gang, and perpetrating the colors, or the different, drawing different symbols and different things, what are some what is some advice? I mean, along with contacting the authorities, obviously, is the first step. But what is some advice where things you both can look out for, but also maybe try to have conversations with and kind of interject with and try to help steer away from the past?
Well, there's two issues that you just talked about right there. The first issue would be identifying if there's a problem or if there's an issue, which was also part of my job when I was up in the suburbs as a school resource officer. I started the Lake County Association of School Resource Officers because I quickly realized that all the big high schools in Lake County had officers, but we weren't always communicating enough about some of these students that were transferring between our schools and things that we needed to know that could help each other out. So that became a big part of our mission. And on that particular unit or in those meetings, I did have the gang background at the time. I mean, things have changed greatly since the 90s.
Sure.
But at the time, I was able to help a lot of schools with symbols that they were finding in the buildings. I was able to go to buildings and do trainings for staff, for teachers, and for custodial staff on what symbols mean and what to recognize and what this means. So there's that. The education on the recognition part of it is huge. I'm pretty fortunate. I live in three counties, where we have a little bit of it, but not a ton. So I don't come across that part as much. The hard part, and I can just talk to you about my personal experiences of trying to help young men, mostly men. I mean, there was some
Sure.
females I
Sure.
dealt with, but mostly it was young men getting out of gangs, which is very, very hard to do.
Correct.
You talk about some of the areas you've been in and lived in. I mean, some of them didn't want to become gang members, but they had no choice.
It's
There was absolutely no choice.
it's a survival tactic
They were
in
going to
some ways.
continue to physically get beat up to the point that they might die if they didn't join the gang, and there wasn't much they could do about it. And if they have two parents at home or one parent, they didn't have the resources to get them out of the area, or the
Yeah.
parent might not particularly care because they might have been involved in some things that weren't
Yeah.
good. So it's some sad stories, and when you try and help them get out, when I was doing it, I mean, it's even more dangerous.
Sure.
Trying to figure out a way for them to get out, because those are the beatings that they took that you would die from if
Yes.
you wanted to get out of a gang. So it
Yes.
was a very, very depressing time in my life. I mean, there was a few success stories. I was in 3 shootings. I thank God I didn't get shot, and I always thank God I never had to shoot anyone, because I mean, my mind was right with it. I knew during those incidents, but I'm
Hmm.
glad that I didn't.
Sure.
And I don't know how it would have affected me later if I had to. I had a couple friends in the department that did have to, and I know it affected them for a while afterwards. So it's a hard situation. But if we're going to truly make a difference, like in the large urban areas with those situations, then we have to start getting into those areas, people that have the money and have the funds and the access, and giving opportunities for some of the young people in those areas to do other things than be in gangs.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because this actually, I think this is actually a really, really interesting way we can discuss this. So teaching and being a police officer in some urban areas or inner city areas sometimes is very similar, and here's how I'm correlating the two. Oftentimes the officer or the teacher does not live in that area, so is going into the area. And you may, because we're also okay, we're dealing with teachers. A majority of teachers are young white females who are going into an area to go teach, who kids are speaking a language you don't understand, they're listening to music you don't listen to, they're around things that you've never been around. um, do you see the similarity? You've obviously dealt with it on both ends. Do you see the similarities there? And what are some things that you can do? Because I would imagine there are some communal things that an officer has to do that a teacher can do as well, going into a community to, or an administrator, a principal. I just talked with recently with a principal of a school who's at an inner city school in Philadelphia, and he talks about doing community walks, and he goes out and walks the community and talks with the people in the community and those things. Are there similarities, or am I comparing two things that aren't similar at all?
Well, I can only speak for Illinois right now, and I'm on the state board of the Illinois Principals Association. So we have over 5,000 members. The main organization, the professional organization for principals in the state of Illinois, and our office is in Springfield, which is the middle of the state. But we have a lot of principals up in the Chicagoland area that are our members. And when I'm doing work with the IPA and listening to their stories and what they're dealing with, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. They have limited resources. They don't pay their teachers near enough to do the job that they do. And then we go back to what I just said earlier. How can teachers be effective, and how can students show up to learn when the number one thing on their mind is their safety?
Yeah.
And some of those areas and those schools that you're talking about, it's a horrible situation because they're not safe.
Yeah.
And then on top of it, in some of these large cities, we have elected officials talking about, well, it'll be safer if we take away funds from the police department, or let's defund the police, let's get rid of those school resource officers because all police are evil. And I almost want to just hang my head down and cry, because it's like, do you not understand what you're doing? You're just making the situation worse.
Yeah.
And it's really hard. And I mean, I'm very fortunate because, yeah, we have some large communities in my 3 counties. But one of the things I love about being out here is they're not too large that we're not all involved in everything. Like I serve on several boards in the area, and several, we have a major uh, grant to fight opioids that we
Yeah.
got from the federal government called Project Open, that affects our 3 counties. We just got another grant because we're starting to explore school-based health centers. In some of our larger districts, we want to partner with the health departments and the hospitals to get clinics set up in the schools, so that when students need our low-income students need medical attention, or they need mental health services, they can get that by
That's
walking down the
awesome.
hallway. So that's the nice thing out here, where in some of those large urban areas, when I listen to my friends and colleagues that are still working in those areas, man, their challenges are deep and tough, and I feel for them.
Yeah. How do you acclimate yourself to that type of community? So you did it as an officer. If you were to give a principal some advice, it's because I think a lot of I don't know. I'm not gonna give my assumption because I'm not gonna speak for the experiences of others, I guess. But what are some things you, because I'm with you. I fully believe that I think we just live in a world where everybody gets lumped in with, it's the whole bad apple lumped in. We're all there. And the reality of it is there's screwballs, idiots in every workplace, in every job, whether it's the armed services, whether it's teachers, whether it's custodians, whether it's anybody. And you know, do we need to work? It's kind of like pointing out the negative incident versus the positive incident that you went through. Do we need to eliminate the bad apples? 100%. But we also need to support the good apples, and we need to uplift those things and provide those resources. So what are some things, if you were a teacher or you were a principal taking a job at an inner city school where these things are happening, what are some of the things you would do to try to connect with the community when you get there?
Well, there's a handful of things. You mentioned a community walk, and I'm sure you've heard this term, community-oriented policing. It when somebody goes into an area like that, first you have to win the trust of the people in that area. If you're not committed to getting out and about and finding out what the real issues are and winning their trust, then you're going to be fighting an uphill battle. And I don't know that it can get better. In law enforcement, there was a couple of areas that we had to go in and make a lot better. I mean, areas of communities that were not good, and that's the first thing we did. We opened up offices like in certain apartment complexes in those areas, and there was one of us stationed there at all times, and we went out and we built a rapport with the residents of that area. And as they got to know us and trusted us, they would let us know where the issues were and where the problems were, and then we could start to focus on those issues or problems. I think one of the big issues today in some of the inner cities is you'll have people that will let the school and will let the police know where the problems are, but do they have the resource and the backing to take care of the
Yeah.
problem? I mean, if day after day they're going in and trying to eradicate some of these issues and they're making legal arrests and doing the things they need to do, and 5 hours later that person's back out on the street causing the same problems and making the same illegal money and terrorizing the same people, how do you get that cycle to change? That's really tough because pretty quickly those people that were trying to help you take care of the problem, if
Yeah.
they're seeing the problems not being taken care of and now they have a concern
Yeah.
that the bad people might get mad at them for trying to help out, it,
Correct.
it turns into that vicious cycle that doesn't get better. I think it's got to be a total commitment in whatever area you're focused on, that the community, that the police, that the state's attorney, that the mayor, that the elected officials are all willing to admit that there's a problem and all willing to work together on how to make the problem better. And I'm not just saying that that's a law enforcement issue. It's a total commitment by all parties involved, or it's going to be very hard to make things better in that area.
Sure. Sure. And obviously schools play a huge part in a piece of that, of trying to do the early interventions and trying to do the early guidance and those different things, which I think is a lot of why I enjoy this next stage of my life, is being able to come and sit down in front of I have a unique journey and a unique path where you can take me to a prison and sit me down with the nastiest of criminals, and I can relate and hold their attention and engage with them, or I can go sit down and talk to your fundraisers and your millionaires and CEOs and entrepreneurs in town and hold their attention. And I feel like I have to use that in a way. And so you talked about the office and the community and the apartment complex. So the apartment complex I was born, they ended up putting a chain link fence across one of the access roads coming into it. So there's only one way in and one way out. And then they put a a dispatch hubs, a police hub there, right at the front. So limit. I mean, criminals don't want the presence of police on a regular basis, so they move and they go somewhere else. And so I think that is. Yeah, I think that's important work. Let me ask you this: if you were to pick up the phone and call yourself way back when you started this education journey, what's something you would share with yourself about the journey ahead?
To be honest with you, I tell myself I don't know how lucky I was about to be. I really would. I mean, I've like been so blessed and enjoyed every step of it. I mean, when I made the move to change career, it's not easy at 30 years old. You know,
No,
I've
no.
I was in a situation where, I'm 51 now. So if I would have stayed in my old job, I could have retired.
Yeah.
I could have been fully retired right now and on to doing something else. So there was a lot of thought and stress and anguish that went into it because at the moment, are you making the right decision? I've just been, I prayed about it and I've always felt like I'm going to be the guy that follows my heart and what I truly, if I, we all talk about what our why is. If
Sure.
we
Well,
figure out
that was going to be my next question. So you're leading right into it.
if we can do it, if we can figure out what our why is and then figure out a way to build a career around that, holy cow. So I just felt inside that it was the right decision to make. And I still don't know how somebody moves out to a new area, in 2001 with no education degree, no education experience, and 19 years later is getting ready to be the regional superintendent of schools overseeing all three counties. That's just amazing. And all I do is I come in every day and I try and do everything I can to try and help kids and help educators help kids. And then if I have spare time, I'm thinking, what else could I be doing to help kids? And that's led me to be on a number of region boards and on the state board of the IPA. And I love giving back to the profession and I love giving back to educators and helping them help kids. So it's just been a great ride. I've been very blessed. So I would honestly tell myself, you're making the right decision. Now get going.
Yeah. It you and I sound like we're driven by a lot of the similar things. So I play a lot for legacy. For me, legacy is I want to leave the best legacy possible moving forward, especially coming from my background. So my situation was a bit different where I don't have a relationship with either one of my parents. I come from these different things. I want to leave a legacy that lives much longer than what I'm doing now. We're doing it in two completely different ways, but from a community standpoint, you are clearly doing that with. So I'm going to ask, what is your why? Why do you do? Why do you wake up every day and accept these challenges every day?
I think in the world today, and if you learn more about trauma and what trauma does to young people, if you read the ACEs study, I mean, that's scary stuff. I mean, we
Yeah.
all think that, yeah, okay, and I'm an ex police officer. I was one of those guys that people would tell me, yeah, this happened to me. And I'd be like, all right, whatever, pull your big boy pants up and get on with it.
Yeah.
But now that we have medical proof with this longitudinal ACEs study that if you go through multiple traumas before the age of 12, and then they track these people into adulthoods, not only is there mental issues, but people are dying earlier of heart disease,
Yeah.
cancer. I mean, the stress and trauma at a young age are creating all these other things. And when you have school districts now, and this is common across the country, we're up to 50% of your student enrollment are truly low income, and you start to talk to them and you find out the things that they've been through at an early age that are no fault of their own. I think to myself, man, if I was in their shoes, would I have made it? Or how
Yeah.
would I have turned out? Or would I have been tough enough to make it? So the ability to work with teachers and to work with principals on helping those kids and talk about a dream job. I get to go work every day. I get over there, at least if I'm not out of town, I get over there once a day to check in on the school, check in on my principal and teachers and say hi to the students and see how they're doing. Because I mean, we've got 70 that are multiple traumas
Yeah.
that have caused issues. And in the old typical schooling, it was like, you know what, this student's getting on my nerves. I don't have
Write
time
them
to
off.
deal with
Yeah.
it. Write him up, suspend him, expel him or her, and then they can become society's problem. We can't do that anymore. We
Yeah.
have to try.
That's probably the worst thing you could do for them.
Exactly, because it gives them no chance. So my why is I get to work with all students, and we have some phenomenal students from great backgrounds that are accelerated students, and I love helping them. I had one of my students at Fulton High School. I got her into a college program that they started at the local community college, and she basically graduated high school with her associate's degree done. So, I love working with all students. It's about finding what their dreams are and what their aspirations are and trying to figure out a way to help them reach those dreams. Because here's the problem with education, we don't ever know how we're doing.
Yeah.
My teachers would get tired of me asking this. I would be
Yeah.
like, how we doing? Well, 40% of our students got into college last year and registered for college. I said, great. Do we know if they make it to the second year?
Yeah.
What if 35% of them flunk out in the first year because we didn't give them the tools needed to be successful with the
Yeah.
other parts of college other than just the academics? And the state will tell us, forever in Illinois that if your student gets a 21 on the ACT, well, they're ready, they're good, and then you're a good
Yeah.
principal, you're a good teacher.
Yeah.
How many people I know that got
That's
18 or ACT that are now running successful companies and are
wow.
millionaires? So the problem in education is that the federal government, the state government, none of them have a real barometer on how we're doing. So the cool part about that for me is that's up to the individual schools and the leadership of those schools and the teachers of those schools to try and figure out how we're doing and are we serving our kids the best and what else can we be doing to help kids.
Yeah. I got a 15, Chris. So on the ACT. So
I got a
uh,
I got a, I got a 19. So the state would have said that
you and I are out.
I'm not good enough. I got
We're
a 19
not.
the first time I took it. So I'm not good enough, but apparently now as an adult, I'm okay to oversee 24 school districts.
No doubt. So right here on the wall, I actually keep a copy of my transcript. That's what that is. I was giving a talk in England, and I had a kid tell me, he's like, "There's no way you've done all these things and traveling around the world. You're just telling me a story because I've had some trouble in school, and you're just." I was like, in my head, I'm thinking, well, you son of a gun, you think I'm just up here, just blowing smoke at you. So I said, give me your email address. I said, when I go home, I'm gonna get a copy of my transcript, and I'm gonna email you a copy. So I keep a copy, and I actually travel with a copy with me because kids are there's there's no way, and I'll show it to them. Right here it is. This is it, and I use that as an example, and I talk about it in different ones. Even one of the funny stories that I use is even in school. So I do all the cooking here at my house. My wife cannot boil water, and that's not a slight to her. She will openly admit it. But I can actually really cook. I learned to cook at a young age, just being at home and parents not being around or working and going to school at night or whatever. So I can cook. Well, my senior year of high school, I got a 33 in foods. Right? It doesn't mean that I don't know what I'm doing. It just means that I just wasn't engaged. It wasn't there. And I think back. I never, a lot of for me and what drives me in comparison. I've had friends go off to the penitentiary. I've got an interview I'm going to do with three friends of mine that each were sentenced to over 10, 12 years for drug trafficking, and they're all from different parts. And now they've come out and they're trying to get their life together. One's starting a restaurant, the other one's writing books, some different things. And it's like, I want to dive into and try to understand why were they have to go down this path, but I didn't. What was it about me? Because I mean, let's all be honest. We're all kids, especially growing up in high school. We're all around things, around people that we shouldn't be around. Like, sometimes the difference is we're just lucky, and some of us just never got caught, right? Some of us just didn't, those different things. And I love your view on it, of hey, like, just these. You stated it, and not all educators get that. So I'm glad you did. You stated it. These kids are going through things that are of no fault of their own. Why are we punishing a kid who literally has no control over what's happening in his environment, who his parents are, the neighborhood he lives in? He has no control over that whatsoever. He's literally surviving. And I tell teachers, and I have a talk that I give, and I am him. I am that kid that you dealt with this. I am that, and here's how I turned out. And I talk about there's no kid that comes in to school that just wants to be a jerk just to be a jerk. That a 14-year-old doesn't come to school and do that. So I love that outlook, that you have. So I'm gonna ask a couple more questions here, and then we'll wrap it up because I certainly know you're a busy guy and you've got a lot going on. Um, what is I I I believe that there is a need for male teachers in in the workforce, and that's not a slight to female teachers, but I think that there is a big, because we all know that there's a huge part of our population now that is growing up in single parent homes. They either have a dad part time or they don't have a dad at all. So having that male figure at a young age from a discipline standpoint to be able to learn to communicate and take some constructive criticism from males and those kind of things. Do you see that as something that we need to figure out how to get more of, and that's males in the education system?
So here's what I've noticed in a lot of our students that come from two parent households or have that positive male role model in their life. or even if the parents are divorced, but the father is still very involved in the student's life and caring and at events and doing the things, man, those students seem to do so much better. Like if I look at my students that I have at the alternative school right now, especially the male students, I start to talk to them. Some of them don't even want to bring up their dad or don't want to talk about it or won't even breach the subject. And you can tell as soon as you start to talk to them that, okay, I need to leave that alone because something's wrong there.
Yep.
I mean, in law enforcement, when I was doing my internship out of college, I worked in the Lake County Jail for 2 months. And in the conversations I had, I can't remember one male inmate that had anything positive to say about their father. So I think if we can start to agree that young men growing up without at least one positive male figure in their life tend to really struggle and really not do well, then man, there's a place to start. How do we get more? I'm part of a local mentor program too for one of our school districts,
Mm-hmm.
where it sucks with COVID because we were just starting. I was going over to see him at the middle school once a week, and then 2 weeks after we started meeting, COVID hit. So
Yeah.
now we've been apart, and they're trying to figure out how we can maybe through Zoom hook up again. But we have to get more males in communities like yourself and like myself available to those people, those young men, middle school, high school that are in that situation, and see if we can help, see if we can start to make a difference, because I think it's a huge issue, a huge, huge issue. And I understand things happen in relationships and divorces happen,
Sure.
but if a father just gives up and isn't there, for their male son, it's very, very hard. And I've seen it firsthand in law enforcement. I've seen it firsthand on the gang unit, and I've seen it firsthand in my education career.
Absolutely. Do you think there's a way or a program that we can find more people like you? And I don't mean that directly, as in Chris, hey, you're a great guy and I'm blowing smoke at you. I mean more police officers who are good police officers who are now looking to make a bigger impact. Because I would have to believe there. I mean, let's be honest, teachers and educators and police officers, they're both underpaid, right? And they're both stressful environments, they're both stressful situations. One can be a little bit more dangerous than the other on either side. um what there has to be a, because it's not, we have, I guess, I think there's probably a stigma of I'm not going to go be a teacher and sit in the classroom and be kindergarten cop and these different things. There are there programs out there that do that, and if not, I'd love to help figure out how we can bring an awareness to that, because I can see how the fruit of that labor of you doing that has paid dividends for your community, and I can only imagine that that would be the case if we had more of it.
Well, here's what we have to do first, and I don't know about other states, I don't know about Kentucky, but in Illinois, we're tackling a huge educator shortage issue.
Yes.
Like we
Yes.
are, we are. It's critical. Like people do not want to go into the profession anymore for the low pay that they get and the things that they're asked to do. So there's a segment of society, for instance, in Fulton, I had a retired engineer in his 50s that wanted to come in and teach advanced math for us, had the qualifications. I mean, I met with them, didn't have the license, and that's how that goes. So the regional superintendents, which I'm part of the association of the state, along with the State Board of Education and a number of groups, we're working on ways to make that easier, to change that licensure law. Because you know as well as I do, if a police officer retires at 51 with a bachelor's degree, or leaves the career at 30 like a bachelor's degree with me, I can't go to a high school and teach. I can teach a specialized program, like a CTE program,
Yeah, but
like
it has to be a specific. Yeah.
career, right? Because I had the bachelor's degree and I had the 3 years of experience. So we do have, like the welding teacher at Whiteside where I used to work. They had a bachelor's degree and they had 3 years of experience in welding. So we got them their certification. We need to look for ways to get certifications to people easier, because I talk to retired police officers that are interested in teaching, and then when they find out, like if they don't have a bachelor's degree, that they have to go back to school, get a bachelor's degree, go through student teaching, pass all these tests, they're done. They're
Yep.
out. That's not what they want at 51. So I think we can start to get more people interested in becoming teachers and giving back to our kids as a second career. But we first have to tackle the certification issue and how we help make that easier, more doable, and more affordable.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Man, what a story. So we'll start to wrap this up. How I wrap it up is I ask two personal questions. to you, just so that they can get to know you a little bit better as a person and those things. And then I've had a lot of feedback from some of the people we've interviewed in the early part of this that have said, "Hey, Shane, I've got questions." So I'm actually going to allow you to ask me a question at the very end before we wrap it up. My first question is, um, how in the heck are you still a Bears fan? I guess let me tell on myself a little bit here. So I was a Bears fan for a small period of time as a little kid during, the Jim McMahon era, and then coming in. So Jim Harbaugh is from. Well, I don't actually know where he's from, but his dad was the longtime football coach in Bowling Green at Western Kentucky University. So a unique story. He would come down and spend a lot of time in Bowling Green, and his sister Joni worked for my dad at a workout facility, athletic club in town, and she would actually watch my brother. So I've gotten to know the family. So when he was there, he would come down and. He came and speak at the school, and I'd throw football with him if he'd ever stop by and those things. So I was a Bears fan for a little bit. I quickly outgrew that. Um, but I'm just curious, how are you still a Bears fan?
So you know what? I got to blame that on my dad. You know,
Okay, you're a
those
loyal guy. You're a loyal guy.
I grew up in the north suburbs, and when I was a young kid, he took me to my first Bears game at Soldier Field, and I just remember walking in, and I remember seeing the field and sitting on those cold metal benches, and watching that first game, and then I was done. And then the next year, he took me to Wrigley Field for the first time. I remember standing outside Wrigley Field and going, "This place looks like a dump," and my dad said,
Yeah,
"Well, just wait." And then we walked out that first
oh,
tunnel, and I saw the field, and then I was done.
yeah,
So, and I played hockey growing up. That was my favorite sport. So, and I was very fortunate because my dad did some work with the Blackhawks.
okay,
And one of the former Blackhawks players, Reggie Kerr, got injured and had to retire early, and he went to work for my dad's company. So I was in middle school and high school, and getting to go to Blackhawks games all the time because my dad had seasons tickets. And then after the game, I was going out to dinner with him and Reggie Kerr and the rest of the players.
hearing
Like
the stories and yeah,
and Grant Mulvey and Phil Russell and Doug Wilson and Dennis Savard and some of these guys. So as a kid getting to hang out with them, I was just in awe. But it's just your first initial exposure to those teams and those moments that become important. And I just thank God to this day that he didn't drive me up to Lambeau Field and take me into one of those games because I'd be in some serious mental issues if I was a Packer fan. And
oh man,
you just know the rivalry between the Bears and the Packers.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. You guys maybe are the most disrespected undefeated team right now, in the NFL.
And we deserve it. I got to tell you, I wasn't too fired up going into this year with Mitchell as our quarterback. But
Yeah,
if Foles can stay healthy and our defense can stay healthy, hey, I think we can play with anyone. But those are two big ifs.
man, Foles has got ice in his veins. He just has he has a knack for showing up when he needs to show up.
Yep.
I love it. I love it. Chris, what is one book that you would recommend for all educators out there?
Right here. I don't know if you can see it. The
I
21
can.
Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell. He's one of my favorites. It doesn't matter. Wait, people say, well, wait, I'm a teacher, Chris. I'm not in a leadership position. And I would say, are you kidding me?
You
How many
absolutely
students
are.
are you in front of every day? You are their leader. So, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell is probably the best book I've ever read. Anytime I do, when I was a principal at Fulton High School, we had a community involvement program, and I'm trying to fix the shortage of educators. So that involved a senior picking a business out in town and going and spending a semester at that business, working every day, and deciding if they want to do that. Well, I told all my students, any of you that want to be a principal, you're going to come and work with me during your class time. You're going to learn the ins and outs of being a principal, but you're also going to do a book study with me because if you're ever going to move into a leadership position, we're going to go through this. And the book comes with a workbook that you can buy
Sure.
too. I can't tell you how many of my students said that was the most important thing they did, going through that book study with me. I have a second year principal at running our alternative school right now who's just phenomenal. It's his second year as an administrator. Great guy. He's a certified principal and a certified social worker. His dream job
Oh
is to
man,
help alternative students. Him and I are doing the book study right now. If I could,
awesome,
anybody who's ever going to be able to have a profound effect on other people needs to read that book.
awesome. Awesome. So before we wrap it up, I'll turn it over to you, and you can ask me. It can be about anything. It can be about my past. It can be about my travels. It can be about this podcast. Anything. I'll turn it over to you.
So when you're done with this project or these interviews, then what are we going to do next to change the world? What are we going to do with this work to try and make things better in education?
Well, my goal is to get this out to educators, all around the world. And then there's definitely going to be, I think, much like you. While I'm not going through a doctorate program, and I'd fall asleep within the first class of what you're doing. I definitely plan to. There's going to be some commonalities and some similarities to these stories and good quality, successful educators that are there. A book may or may come out of that. I'm actually in the process of writing my first book right now called "Your Trauma Is Your Superpower." So showing these traumas that you go through and how to use those things in my own life experiences and how to use those things in a positive way. And then I'm going to do my best to hit the road and who knows, maybe end up in your neck of the woods giving some talks at schools or, wherever around the world that I go to give some talks and share my story and share what I've learned through this and, both help educators understand that you're doing something good. And I know it's hard sometimes, and we talked about this off air. Teachers don't always necessarily see the fruits of their labor. You put in, it's like if you've ever worked in a field at all of it, hilling potatoes or doing anything, you do it, and it's like, man, if you don't ever actually get to eat the food that comes out, it almost you feel a little bit empty. You feel like I've put in all these hours, and then the deer come and eat all your crop, or they eat your garden, and it's like, what the heck did I do all this for? So I want to help be a part of that to go around and help educators and say, look, the work you're doing matters, and share my stories and the impact because it wasn't always a teacher necessarily that made an impact on me. I have a story where actually a custodian when I was in second or third grade made an impact on me and how that, just a simple conversation when we were collecting erasers to clean the erasers in the elementary school. So there's those things. So that's where I hope to do this and anything I can do to help share your story. I think hopefully I think you do, but the work that you're working on to figure out what you guys are doing right in the area and how that I think that is literally work that could save people's lives. That 100% is. But I think your story and your journey needs to be told in a way, both from an outlook and perception of law enforcement, but also educators, and blending that in one. I think it's a truly inspiring message. I'm not just telling you that just to tell you that. I don't. Authenticity for me is massively important, and it's how I move and maneuver. And I didn't, I didn't pick anything up other than that from you. So I appreciate that, and I can only imagine that the people there in that community, obviously those families of those kids who were at that school that day. Um, at Fulton High School when that happened. I can only imagine how thankful they are to have somebody like you in place and have the people in place in the community that acted as swiftly as they did to ensure that that outcome became a non-story in a lot of ways than an actual story. But now in the role that you're going to, the thought process and yes, the curriculum is important, but what are we doing to turn these people into human beings is I would argue in 2020, maybe even more important in some ways to do it. And kudos to you for doing that. I'd love to stay in touch with you on a personal level because I think when you meet good people like that and you come across people who figured it out and who are willing to, I mean, in a lot of ways, do what we talk about here, and that's accept the challenges. You are waking up every day and accepting those challenges. So in a long answer, that is my motivation. That's what my next steps are, and yeah, who knows? Maybe I'll end up in your neck of the woods and give a couple talks, and you can take me to whoever has who in your version who has the best pizza in your neck of the woods.
We've got a couple. It's nothing like up in Chicago, but we've got a couple that are close.
Well, good deal, Chris. I appreciate your time. I appreciate what you do, and there's no doubt that community is lucky to have you, and I know they appreciate you. And thanks for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's stay in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Yep.